The moment is now. Are you ready?
Hello, my name is Damyan. I'm from Bulgaria, and in this video I'm going to show you how to complete an Armis mission called Effective Teamwork. For this mission I have to use 3 distinct teams in order to do something meaningful and creative offensively or defensively. It is up to me which pieces I'm going to include in my teams and what strategy I'm going to use in order to capture my opponent's flag. I'm going to use my most recent setup because I previously created a setup for this mission. This was the last mission I played. Now the computer accepted my setup, and that means he's located into the south with the green pieces and I am located into the north with the red pieces. For my first team I'm going to use my vice president and my army in order to block the eastern corridor and the eastern part of my setup zone in general. For my second team I'm going to use my coast guard and the marine piece, which is located between my coast guard and my submarine, in order to cover the coastal waters of the Great Sea and to prevent any of my opponent's pieces to go through it. So, having this in mind, I assume that most of the action is going to be concentrated into the expanse, where I have my second marine piece, my president, and my nuke. I'm going to use my marine piece, which is between my vice president and my media, and my president in order to defend the expanse, and I'm going to use my nuke in order to activate it and capture as many of my opponent's pieces as I can, in order to clean the path of my president and to capture my opponent's flag through the expanse with my president with few moves. I can't say exactly how many moves I am going to need, because I don't know if my opponent's president is going to be in the game or not, because if my opponent's president is still in the game, that means he is able to move his flag, which can make my mission harder. Something else, I'm going to use my jet and my helicopter in order to lure my opponent's pieces onto specific areas on the board. I'm going to use them as baits, and at the same time I'm going to use them as sacrifices, because as we all know, the nuke needs 3 of the 9 own military pieces to be captured in order to be able to be activated. So I also want to remind you that I have to be careful for my opponent's child and diplomat, because these are the 2 pieces which are able to capture my nuke on land. I remind that the child has 1, 2, 3 or 4 multi-directional spaces on land. This is the move of the child. And the diplomat has 1, 2 or 3 uninterrupted multi-directional spaces on land. So I have to be careful, and I should not get them out of my sight. So my opponent started with moving his marine piece to the expanse and to the north, to the northwest in general. So what I'm going to do is to start with pushing my coast guard to the coastal waters in order to try to organize a control over the coastal waters in advance. Now my opponent is to go. He sees few of my pieces with his marine piece, which are my submarine and my aircraft carrier, but I cover them with my marine piece. I also cover my aircraft carrier with my jet. So I don't think he would dare to capture them. He moved his president onto the south port, from his setup zone onto the south port. So what I'm going to do now is to move my coast guard 2 blocks to the southwest onto the coastal waters. 1, 2. And with my next move, I intend to move my marine piece onto the northeastern side of the coastal waters of the Great Sea, in order to cover as many spaces of the coastal water as I can. at the same time I have to be covered for this marine piece. So if I move my marine piece onto the coastal water space here next to the Polder Valley, he would be able to capture my marine piece with his marine piece. But he would not be able to see my marine piece if I place it on this space here onto the coastal waters. It will be out of the sight of my opponent's marine piece. So I'm moving my marine piece onto this space, onto the northeastern side of the coastal waters of the Great Sea. By the way, my opponent moved his vice president into the expanse. The move before my move with my marine piece. It directly sees my aircraft carrier, but that's not that big danger because I don't include my aircraft carrier in my strategy. And my opponent marine piece captured my aircraft carrier. I don't plan to use my jet as an offensive piece in this mission, but when my opponents give me this opportunity, I don't see a reason for skipping it. So I directly capture my opponent's marine piece with my jet. So now my opponent will probably capture my jet with his vice president or his army. By the way, I cover all the spaces of the coastal waters of the Great Sea except the south corner of the coastal waters of the Great Sea. Just want to mention that. My opponent captured my jet with his marine piece. I did not expect this. I expected him to capture it either with his army or with his vice president. So now my opponent's marine piece is onto the western side of his setup zone. So what I'm going to do now is to organize my team number 1, the vice president and the army. I start with moving my army 2 blocks to the southeast. This is very important space because this is the landing zone of the flight path of my opponent's helicopter through the eastern sea. At the same time, this space is a landing zone of another flight path. The flight path of my helicopter, if he eventually moves his helicopter onto the space next to the most eastern block on the board, into the eastern corridor. So if my opponent moves his helicopter onto this block, this would be the landing zone of his flight path through the coastal waters of the eastern sea. So this army piece covers the landing zones of 2 flight paths, which are located on one space next to the north port. My opponent decided to move his coast guard onto the coastal waters. He might want to endanger my coast guard or my marine piece onto the coastal waters of the Great Sea. But my marine piece and my coast guard are still out of the range of my opponent's coast guard. So that's not a danger for me for now. So what I'm going to do is to move my vice president next to my army and next to the north port in order my vice president and my army to be able to cover each other. And at the same time I cover with my vice president the northeastern side of the eastern corridor, the northeastern part of the eastern corridor. My opponent decided to move his vice president 2 blocks to the north, and he directly sees my nuke with his vice president. Fortunately, according to the Armis rules, my opponent's vice president cannot capture my nuke. My nuke can be captured on land only by my opponent's child and my opponent's diplomat, which are still into my opponent's setup zone. Okay. By the way, I've already lost 2 of my military pieces. I have to lose one more of my military pieces in order to be able to activate my nuke. Now my nuke is into non-offensive and unarmed phase. Then, when I lose 3 of my military pieces, it will be into non-offensive and armed state. And the third state is when my nuke is offensive and activated. This is in the moment when I activate my nuke. So, in order to switch from the first phase to the second phase, I need to lose one more of my military pieces, which would probably be my helicopter. But first, I would move my marine piece 1, 2, 3 blocks. 3 blocks to the southwest, onto the block between my mover and my submarine, in order to organize my third team, which consists of my marine piece between my mover and my submarine, my president, and my nuke. My opponent moved his army 1 block to the north into his setup zone. Now I am going to move my nuke 1 block to the southwest, and now my nuke is located into the expanse. This is the expanse area, into the western part of the board. Now my opponent is to go. My opponent decided to move his marine piece into the expanse, and my opponent's marine piece is located now into the mid part of the expanse. Now I'm going to move my helicopter deeper into the expanse, 1 block away from the most western block on the board, close to my opponent's vice president and my opponent's marine piece, in order to make my opponent capture my helicopter with either his vice president or his marine piece. Okay, he did it. Now I'm able to activate my nuke. If I activate my nuke, I would capture my opponent's marine piece into the expanse and my opponent's vice president, but I would also capture my own submarine, because it is in the range of my nuke's blast zone. So my submarine is not included into my strategy, but I will try not to capture my own submarine in order to show you that you always have an alternative. For example, so I'm not going to capture my submarine. Now I am going to move my nuke 1 block to the south, and I would still cover all the spaces my opponent can go with his marine piece. Only my opponent's vice president would be able to run away, but if he decides to run away, he would do it this would be the only space where my opponent's vice president would be out of my nuke's blast zone, and it is well covered by my marine piece, so that's not a danger for me. Now I move my nuke 1 block to the south, and with my next move I intend to capture my opponent's marine piece into the expanse and my opponent's vice president into the expanse. Now my opponent is to go. my opponent decided to move his helicopter onto the landing zone I was talking about, next to the most eastern block of the board. Fortunately, I covered the landing zone of the flight path he has now with my army. This is the flight path. By the way, I missed something, went out of my sight while I was talking, and this was that I would capture my own coast guard with my nuke if I activate it here onto this space of the expanse. I don't want this to happen. So what I'm going to do now is to move my nuke one more block to the south. And I think I can do this. Yes, I can do this because my opponent would not be able to run away with his pieces toward my setup zone, because I cover it with my marine piece into my setup zone and with my president, and he would not also be able to run toward his setup zone or toward the coastal waters, because I would cover all the available moving options he has with my nuke. So I move my nuke one more space to the south. With my next move, I'm going to activate my nuke and I'm going to capture my opponent's marine piece and vice president. And also my opponent's media, because he decided to move his media from the space into his setup zone next to his flag onto the most western space of the board, which is deep into the expanse next to his marine piece. I remember that the media needs to be next to any of his own pieces in order not to be forfeit. So he keeps this rule, so the media is still in the game. Now I activate my nuke. My diplomat is forfeit. I also captured my opponent's second marine piece, his vice president, and his media. My opponent decided to move his army one block toward the expanse. It is still into his setup zone. Okay, now I'll try to be quick. Now I move my president or should I capture my opponent's army first? I don't think I have to do this. I move my president deep into the expanse next to the most western block of the board into the expanse. I directly see my opponent's flag and I will be able to attack it with my president. At the same time, I'm out of the sight of my opponent's army. As I previously said before I started the game, my opponent might be able to move his flag if his president is still in the game. As we see, his president is on to the southport, so he decided to run away with his flag. So he moved his flag one block to the north. Now I directly move my president onto the block where my opponent held his flag previously. Now I directly see my opponent's flag and my opponent's reserve. Okay, my opponent decided to move his flag one block to the northeast toward his president. I just want to say something interesting. If he did not move his flag, I would be able to attack either his reserve or his flag. I want to remind that if I have captured my opponent's flag, my president was going to be moved onto the block where his reserve is located, and his reserve was going to be sacrificed, and then my president would still have been out of my opponent's president's sight. So now I capture my opponent's reserve with my president. He decided to move his flag one block to the northeast toward his president, one more block to the northeast. So, if I move my president one block to the north, he would probably move his flag one block to the east, which is between his nuke and his jet. Then I would be able to directly capture my opponent's president onto the south port with it. So that's what I'm going to do now. I move my president one block to the south. He immediately moves his flag one block to the east, and he directly opens me a way to attack his president onto the south port. So I directly capture my opponent's president onto the south port. I remind that my opponent is not able to activate his nuke because one of the requirements a nuke to be activated is to be 3 blocks away from own flag. So now he's trying to get his nuke, probably he's trying to get his nuke 3 blocks away from his flag in order to activate it and to try to capture my president. But I immediately move my president 2 blocks to the southwest. With my next move, I'm going to capture my opponent's flag into his setup zone, and I'm going to complete the mission. My opponent decided to move his jet from the space between his flag and his diplomat into his setup zone, onto the space into the eastern corridor between his helicopter and his nuke. That's not a danger for me because with my next move I capture my opponent's flag and I complete the mission. This is the congratulations sign. So in this video I showed you how to complete an Armis mission called Effective Teamwork, where I organized 3 distinct teams. And I created my own strategy in order to do something meaningful with these 3 teams, offensively or defensively. For my first team, I used my vice president and my army to block the eastern corridor and the eastern part of my setup zone in general, the way through the eastern part of my setup zone. Okay, for my second team, I used one of my marine pieces and my coast guard in order to block the coastal waters and to cover as many spaces as possible. And for my third team, I used my second marine piece, my president and my nuke. I used my president and my marine piece in order to defend the expanse, and I used my nuke in order to activate it and to capture as many of my opponent's pieces as I can. That opened me a nice path through for my president through the expanse, and I completed the mission by capturing my opponent's flag with my president. So, thanks for watching and bye!